Due to the English language's prevalence in almost every single society around the world, it is not a language that belongs to or represents a single group of people. English is a global language, for better or for worse. It is compulsory to be taught throughout the Korean education system, and so people like Soyeon hold just as much cultural claim to the English language as a native English speaker does anywhere else in the world. It's fine to believe that following certain grammar rules would make her songwriting work better in your opinion, but claiming that by not following American or British English grammar rules, she is offending native English speakers is not something that I agree with at all. Should Soyeon be held accountable for her English grammar? No. I want to clarify right at the beginning that I am not against creatively criticizing Soyeon's songwriting on accounts that you think the grammar or pronunciation is impacting the quality of the song in your opinion. That's not what I'm talking about. That is like subjective music taste, and I know a lot of people can't really help the way they feel about songwriting sometimes. I am staunchly against criticizing non-native English speakers' bad grammar and pronunciation by principle. And you know what? I'm even against criticizing native English speakers on the same grounds. I always say on this channel that I am willing to have my mind changed on the things that I say, and that still stands for this topic, but this belief I have is one area that I've held out for a very long time at this point. I recognize my worldview of this is very radical, but in trying to deconstruct my own worldview over the years of studying linguistics specifically, I have always maintained this understanding about the English language. So, as a bit of a background, I recently made a video about linguistically reviewing examples of quote bad English in K-pop. I've made 3 of them at this point, and at the start of each of those videos, I disclaimed that I don't actually believe in the concept of bad English, which, as of this most recent installment of that video series, I found out is a belief that I hold that a lot of people don't agree with when it comes to K-pop, or they don't agree with the concept of bad English not being real in general. I personally believe that as long as there is mutual intelligibility, if 2 people can understand each other in conversation, things like grammar and pronunciation shouldn't matter. I take this belief almost everywhere I go in life, including online, and especially when it comes to K-pop. If someone is communicating with me and they use the wrong your, I don't really care. If I can use context clues to completely understand what they were saying regardless of a grammar mistake, I don't see it as a problem in any capacity. I also take this approach to K-pop. Songwriting, an art form in its own right, is also a form of poetry. I'm not going to condemn a poet for spelling a word wrong in their work of art, whether they misspelled it intentionally or not. I'm not going to condemn a poet for breaking English grammar rules to express an idea, no matter whether they did it intentionally or not, or if I personally believe that using the correct grammar structure would have made the poem a lot better in my opinion. Why? I don't do these things because it's not my art. I didn't create these poems. It is completely okay to dislike Soyeon's tomboy rap verse for not being grammatically correct, for odd pronunciation, and so on. I don't believe in the notion of holding her or any other songwriter accountable for not getting better at English pronunciation or grammar. I understand finding the lyrics corny or even irritating or maybe uncomfortable, but I don't understand the claim that not getting the grammar and pronunciation approved by a third party is disrespectful to the English language and its speakers, which brings me to a common rebuttal point I often get. Butchering any other language would be seen as incredibly offensive. If I were a songwriter, as a native English speaker, I don't know Korean, if I were a songwriter and I wrote my songs in the Korean language with no understanding of grammar, and I did not get the lyrics and pronunciation checked by anybody, and I just decided to release the songs with bad Korean grammar to be promoted commercially around the world, that would be a problem. People would be offended that I had no consideration to even run my lyrics by native Korean speakers. I completely agree that it would be offensive and disrespectful to butcher the grammar and pronunciation of another language. Here is my quite radical worldview when it comes to English. For how widespread the English language is in virtually every country around the world, I don't believe it's a language that necessarily belongs to any one group of people in the same way that Korean belongs to and represents the people of the Korean peninsula. English as a language does not represent any particular group of people or culture in the same way, in my opinion, and thus doesn't have the same potential to be that kind of offensive if used in a poor way. I don't condemn people who find themselves offended by bad English grammar necessarily, but I also don't really understand the rationale behind it either. I think English is a unique language over how universal it is in almost every society and culture on the planet. It's a global language and thus doesn't really belong to anyone anymore, as far as I see it. The English language has quite a storied history of taking over the professional and academic spaces in a country to the point that that country's native language gets almost completely snuffed out, if not actually completely snuffed out, like the language is no longer in use anymore. English has completely replaced it in all aspects of society, so the original language that belonged to that country or represented that country is dying. People aren't using their native language, and the older members of a society who still speak and know the language are actively choosing not to pass it down to their children and grandchildren because they want them to have the best opportunity for success by only knowing English. The amount of countries and areas and instances and groups and cultures where that has happened and is still happening actively to this day is quite concerning. At the professional level, English becomes the only language that is seen as acceptable, that is seen as professional. There's a lot of implications to that connotation with the English language. There's so many countries around the world that operates in this way. The Korean education system mandates English language learning, as do many countries around the world. That's a lot of power the English language has. There are very few languages that have enough power to be able to do this, but the ones that do, in my opinion, should not be held to the same cultural standards as others. English doesn't just represent the United Kingdom. It doesn't just represent the United States of America. It doesn't even represent the Proto-Germanic language areas and countries. It represents the world in this way, in my opinion. And as it exists in almost every culture and society, it rapidly changes and develops new rules on a case-by-case basis. Every language does this, but English does it so continuously and so frequently on a global scale. Soyeon's Red 5 Diamonds in My Bag and Let's Go on Fearless, We Came to Take Win makes perfect sense to English-speaking cultures around the world. So if we're to hold Soyeon's grammar to a certain standard, it would be holding it to an American or British English standard. That's kind of why I don't believe in this call for Soyeon to get better at English grammar. That has a lot of unintended consequences around the world if we start perceiving her lines as bad English just because they don't adhere to American or British English grammar standards. It's not bad English, it's just a different variety of English. Now, I don't suspect Soyeon was actually adhering to any variety of English's grammar rules. I think she was just translating the songs as she goes and writing lines as they fit onto the track. When we look at lines like Red 5 Diamonds, it becomes quite obvious that she was most likely using the Korean grammar system as a frame of reference. Does that make it bad English? My whole point here is to emphasize who is to say that. Who is to say that this isn't just another variety of English, Korean English, right? In any scenario, given the English language's quite complex history all around the world, in Korea specifically, I don't feel the need to see her English songwriting skills as a problem worth fixing if Soyeon as the artist doesn't express a want to do so. I don't think it's that serious. I don't think Soyeon writing her songs with bad English grammar from our perspective should have any sway on her own artistic input and vision. Once again, I think it's fine to hold the belief that Soyeon adhering to specific grammar rules would have made the song better in your opinion, but I don't think that belief should open up a door to a conversation about the importance of American or British English grammar being the standard all around the world, even in K-pop songs, in poetry, right? I understand the need for standardization in places like academic and research environments where precise clarity is necessary for efficacy and sometimes for safety reasons. In those specific situations, sure, let's enforce a specific standard of communication so everyone can remain safe and information can be conveyed as clearly and concisely as possible. K-pop is not one of those environments though. We're not doing rocket science. We're not, doing chemical combination research. Whatever. I don't think people mean to tap into linguistic discrimination when we have these conversations about Soyeon as a songwriter, but it very often does veer into that zone very quickly. I think we as native English speakers ought to have an understanding about how pervasive our language can be and presently is in cultures around the world, how long that has been going on, and the problems that people still face today all around the world as a result of this universal standardization of English. That's all that I think I have to say about this. This is my personal opinion about, quote, bad English in K-pop. I don't think it's something worth holding songwriters accountable for by principle, but again, if you personally think the end product that is songwriting is hindered in some ways on account of pronunciation and grammar, that is completely fine. Music, songwriting is a form of art. It's very easy to get frustrated or irritated or upset, not always in a bad way, but emotionally upset by pieces of art and writing. That is a subjective feeling that each of us have that sometimes, actually oftentimes, is uncontrollable. I don't fault anyone for that in particular. We can't really help the way that we feel about songwriting and messaging and meaning and sound sometimes. But yeah, that is all that I have to say. I really thought this video was going to be maybe 3 to 4 minutes long, but here we are. Thank you for watching this. If you did, please definitely let me know what your thoughts are on this, if you see it in a different way, if you have any other thoughts on this topic, and so on. I really am interested. I don't want to shut anybody down from saying what they want to say about this. I have a very radical, hard set worldview, but if you do have something to say, if you have another thing that you want to add, if you disagree with me, I don't want anybody to feel like they shouldn't be allowed to disagree with me just because I have a hard set opinion on this. I want people to disagree with me. So if you do, please let me know about it. I would love to hear you out. Hopefully you heard me out, but yes, thank you again for watching. Subscribe if you want to, and I will see you next time.